Welcome to Music Matters Podcast with Darrell Craig Harris, talking about all things music with celebrities, artists, music business insiders, and more.
Hi, guys. Welcome to a new episode of Music Matters podcast, where we talk about all things music. And today I have a special guest and a friend, Craig J. Snider. Craig has had numerous hits on the Billboard dance charts with his remixing and producing with many global artists that we're all familiar with. And welcome, Craig. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Thanks for having me, man.
We're the two Craigs, because a lot of people know me as Craig.
That's and I was introduced to you as Darrell, so I should call you Craig.
That's all good. I've been called much worse.
That's right.
How you doing?
Or I could call you Darrell Craig, I suppose.
Well, there you go. Yeah, my other brother Darrell. How is that? You're in Chicago, right?
I am in Chicago, and it is a balmy 40 degrees.
That's
and rainy.
Not bad for Chicago in November.
Right?
Yeah, not too bad.
Unbelievable. Because 3 days ago it was like 55 and sunny, and I was working out on my deck and playing guitar on the porch. And then this morning I woke up and it was in the 30s. It's all over the place.
Yeah.
No rhyme or reason.
You get the lake effect, right? In the wintertime, it's very chilly. You're originally from Boston, is that correct?
Yeah, born and raised there. Absolutely. Yeah.
And New England Conservatory, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, there was actually, I was really lucky. I grew up in Newton, which is just outside of Boston. And there was a smaller music school there in an old converted mansion called the All Newton Music School. So that was my mom trotted me in there, and around 4 or 5 signed me up for piano lessons with someone. And then they, I don't remember them just taking me. I remember them asking me a lot of questions, and I had to sit down at the instrument because she said I had started to kind of self-teach myself.
Yeah.
So it's strange. I have these memories of this kind of older European woman sitting with me at the piano, and it was really kind of dark, giant grand piano, just me and my little hands.
Yeah, it's sort of intimidating.
Yeah. And then, moved through a slew of different German piano teachers. And then once I got to high school age, there were different, at the time, programs you could get involved in, like I did. I got involved in the jazz program at New England Conservatory, which was really amazing in high school. Had a really cool, strong, small ensemble program I got involved in. And then I was taking piano lessons with a Berkeley guy named Mike Donor at the time, who's a Jackie Byard disciple. So I got a little taste of that culture.
Yeah, and there's so many, in that era, Boston, well, in Chicago too, but in Boston, there's so many great musicians. Obviously Berkeley's there too, but great place.
Yeah, there was so much music there, and in that era, it was really easy to sneak into clubs. So every night I was in high school, I was sneaking in to see all these different acts, and as long as I paid the 2-drink minimum, they didn't seem to care.
Yeah, I was doing the same thing in Orange County.
Yeah. Was it? Okay.
Yeah. I used to sneak at Bill Medley, actually, for the Righteous Brothers. I knew all of his guys, his band, and he had a club called Medley's in Orange County. And I used to sneak in. You'd see everybody. And I was like 17, 18 years old. It was so great to be exposed to all that, especially like a place like Boston. Everybody in the world's coming through there, right?
Well, and that's right. And it was just like a community, just like what you're describing. Everybody was there, and if it was a small community, you got to know other people and get to jam with people later on. And I was with I was going to school with a really eclectic group of people. So, we all kind of went out en masse and experienced everything from like really out there avant-garde jazz to, the current flavor of the Boston rock scene, which at the time was very, very robust.
Yeah, and you had everybody in the world coming through there too, right? Guys coming in from New York and from Philly and from.
Yep. Absolutely. So,
What was your
East Coast is so much more condensed, so
yeah,
there's a lot, going from Boston to New York is 3 hours,
right.
right?
Yep.
As opposed to LA to Vegas is what,
Exactly.
5-6 hours
Yeah, in a car.
in a car. Yeah. And being in Chicago, it's a plane, period.
Yeah. What was
It's
your
an hour
first
and a half to New York, 4 hours to LA.
what was your first like professional gig? Like how did that happen for you? Did it just sort of from the club thing, getting to know people, or
It was just probably like a lot of other kids. I just started playing for my peers.
Mhm.
So we had, I was in a band,
Right.
and we would set up and we would get paid to play at, the little coffee shop or the little, all ages. It wasn't called that at that point, but that was like the first, and it was very little money. Basically you're playing for the door, but
Right. Yeah, but
that,
you're
yeah,
learning and you're learning songs, you're getting to
yeah,
meet people and yeah.
exactly. And we were playing really eclectic instrumental music, so
Right. That's
it
cool.
was, it was, it was heavy.
Yeah, and then were you already into production then? Were you starting to get the feeling to get into that or
No, I
how,
was still fantasizing that I was either going to be the next great classical pianist, or I was going to go chase Jack and Harvey and Keith. Actually, Keith was the big one. Keith Jarrett was my idol.
Right, yeah.
Cole concert just
Sure.
blew my mind, changed my
So you were
world.
you were a pretty big lover of jazz in that
Huge
time frame.
lover of jazz and a huge lover of classical music.
Awesome.
And all the fusion stuff as
Yeah.
well.
What years was that? Like that was probably like in the middle of the heavy fusion thing in the 70s, right?
Yeah, late
Time
70s,
frame.
exactly.
So yeah, so there's so much
70s,
experimental stuff going on and
so much experimental stuff. And in fact, the guy that was my mentor in the jazz tip, his name was Mark Harvey, and he was the Reverend Mark Harvey. He had a jazz ministry just down the street from the New England Conservatory. He was a trumpet player.
Yeah,
and
cool.
He used to come and coach us up. And we were trying to play Weather Report and, all that Jeff Beck stuff from Blow by Blow or, whatever.
Yeah.
I love the rock stuff. And being from Boston, obviously Aerosmith and Boston and Cars and all that stuff was there. But, I wasn't drawn to trying to like sing and write songs at that point in time as much as I was really trying to be, I was a guitar player and a keyboard player at the time.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And because I started studying classical guitar at 9 or 10.
Right.
And I loved it. But the guitar players in my little scene were just so like beyond comprehension.
Yeah, I mean, because there's just everybody in the world is right there. Boston. I mean, studying
Berkeley,
with the Berkeley guys. Yeah.
Yeah. And even though we were in high school, I was playing with this kid when I was 16. I was playing with this kid, and I thought I was a decent guitar player. Who was a couple years younger. He had one of those ears where he could literally listen to anything, and grab it within a very short amount of time.
Like a savant.
So, yeah. So like he had like all the classic Hendrix solos down. He could cover, like all that Jeff Beck stuff, like note for note. It was unbelievable. He had a Les Paul, which cost a fortune. And
at the time, you're like, that's like, oh.
I had an Epiphone. I didn't even have a rig to compete.
Yeah.
So I just said, okay, I'll be the keyboard player because I had a Rhodes and I had a Whirly at the time.
But you know what's great about that is those guys, like when you meet them, no matter what instrument they play, they really push you to become a better musician, right? They kind of really amp up the level and.
Well, we played all the time. We rehearsed all the time.
Yeah. That's how you
and that's how you get better. And that's harder in this era for sure with young musicians that I've observed is, that system of coming up by just playing hours and hours and hours a day,
right,
with other people at different levels, right? Because that's kind of how you get better too, right? Because sometimes you're playing with people not as good, and then sometimes you're playing with people that you're just like, I don't even understand what's going on here,
right? Yeah,
and that's obviously you get better by playing more with those people, but you also learn stuff. And case in point, So when I think I was a senior, my final year of music school in college. I was playing in with my peers in a little jazz, in our little jazz program we had at Northwestern here in Chicago. And this kid asked to come and sit in, and he was a saxophone major. He's this tall kid from the Virgin Islands. And you were like, yeah, sure, come on. And so he sat in, and I mean, he was just still trying to figure it out. He was really young, and he was a classical saxophone major, which meant, he was playing like the legit stuff.
Right.
He
Yeah.
was just starting to figure out how to improvise.
A whole different world.
Yeah. So lo and behold, fast forward to now, his name is Ron Blake. He plays in the Saturday Night Live band.
Wow.
He's like, tours the world as a very successful tenor and bari sax player with Christian McBride and that whole crew.
Yeah, right.
He is a badass motherfucker.
Yeah.
And he just plays his ass off. In fact, when he was in town.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you have to like earn your stripes, right? You have to go through and figure it out and bang through and get bruised. Everyone
finds their place at different times, and sometimes you're leaping ahead, and then sometimes you're waiting behind, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. That everybody's kind of on their own journey, and some people also are born with a little extra gear, like my friend that I grew up with, the guitar player, who just had one of those ears where he could hear it and then it hit his hands.
Right.
But what was interesting about him is he never really evolved past that. I went into the world and lost track of him, but he played in local bands, and it didn't mean he was any less of a player, but he just didn't progress past a certain point.
Right.
And then, like, to my point with Ron, who we were all like, yeah, sure, kid, come and play with us. And he just totally lapped us in that world.
And what's funny is with that is you just never know, right? Like we've all had those stories, like the guys we met that we'd like, oh yeah, he was a nice guy, and all of a sudden he's on tour with whomever, and you're like, wow.
Right, and sounds great, and it's if you're reasonably well adjusted, you can be happy for other people, and and cheer them on too, as opposed to, oh, that motherfucker.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you get a lot of that too. So
yeah, right. Fine. So tell me about because you've actually had an enormous amount of success doing the remixing production. I know that's there's a whole lot more. People say remixer, but actually there's a whole big thing with that goes along with that. Tell me how you got into that and how that kind of happened with the production end of things.
Well, at the time, actually, I've kind of, the two tracks that I've had, there at the same time that I was getting into that, I was making a really good living as a session musician in Chicago, and started writing music for commercials.
When did you come to Chicago?
1979.
Okay. Yeah. Was it as a player playing with a band, or how?
No, I got accepted to the conservatory at Northwestern University for music.
Right.
So, and my parents I wanted to leave Boston, and I was hoping to go to a Juilliard or a Mannes or something like that, a really hard, hot, core kind of classical thing. And they were like, nah, you're not going to music school. You have to go, you can be a music major, but you have to go someplace that's also a really good university experience, so that you have exposure to other people and in retrospect, it was perfect for me. It worked out really well there.
Yeah.
In that regard, because it was a great school and it was a very competitive music school. But anyways, so the way that worked was I was actually on the board of NARIS here on the Chicago chapter. And there was an engineer that I used to see all the time as a session keyboard player, who said to me, hey, there's this DJ, his name is Mark Picchiotti, and he's looking for someone to do his music. He's really blowing up in that world, doing records for labels, doing remixes. And I'm like, I don't know what that is, but
because a lot of the DJs, they first started off just mixing other people's records, right? And then it seems like they've morphed into doing their own thing, and they're finding their own music, their own arrangers.
Eventually, right. Yeah. But initially they're known in that world, you get known for playing in clubs and building, and you have an audience. And
Right.
then from that, you can spring to the larger venues or festivals or whatever.
Mhm.
But, you know, you have a little bit of a name going, and that's why a label will come to you, or management will come to you to put your touch on what they're trying to, you know, accomplish, depending
Right.
on the artist and, you
Artists
know,
that they're working with that they want to kind of put a new flavor
where they're
to,
going to
or
break them, what they're going to do with them, etc.
right.
So
Gotcha.
I showed up, and he had something he was doing. The very first thing that I worked on with him was a very classic Pet Shop Boys song called Go West.
Okay.
And it was about the migration of the gay community
Right.
going to San Francisco. And I didn't know much about that culture at all. So not only was it the first record I worked on as a remix, but I was, you know, getting dropped into the whole, you know, gay music scene, which I didn't know anything about.
Which is gigantic,
which,
right? Yeah.
Which I came to learn was massive and
Right.
was international.
Globally, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And it was like, you know, dance music to me was like, what? And
Yeah.
you know, it was a whole
different world.
Just a very different way of thinking. It's a different language. There's a different paradigm to the production, to the way you mix. So it just literally from there, I got really lucky. That one record did really well. And so he was like, great. And so I just started doing everything that he did. And we just kind of grew this thing together. And then I connected with another guy that's here. His name's Ralphie Rosario. And I still work with both of these guys. Ralphie is massive in that world.
And I just checked out a bunch of stuff that you did with him. Actually, I was on your it's mixkitchen.com, right? That's
website. The studio. Yeah, that's the studio website as well.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, there's some great, I mean, like you have the remix for U2 on there. That's awesome.
Yeah, with Lady Gaga.
Yeah, Dido, Katy Perry.
I love that Dido song.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's really interesting. Like you know, and that's the thing. That's not really my world either, the whole DJ remix thing. But man, I really dug, and I dug the fresh approach. Like we know a lot of those songs, but then you hear what you did with it, and it's like, oh, that's really cool. Like it's really, and it has a very global vibe, I guess I would say. Is there a certain, how do you approach that? Like when you get approached by a group to do that kind of a thing, like what's your thought process? How do you get into it?
If there isn't a direction, if someone doesn't say, I'm looking for something very specific, which more often than not is not the case, but every once in a while that's true.
Yeah. Are they kind of like, let's see what you can come up with and see if we're on, right?
Right. And I'm left to my druthers. I want to like take it to a whole other place. And so, you know, where like my jazz and my classical composition background comes in is, for me, the big thing is, okay, I'm going to kick this song spot harmonically.
Yeah.
Because I can't do anything with it melodically.
Right.
But I can create a whole other world by just completely reworking how it works harmonically.
Yeah, that's why I like that. I like that when you did with the U2 song. I'm sorry, what's the name of the tune? Summer of Love.
Summer of Love.
I should say. Yeah, I like that. I also the Beyonce tune. I was like, yeah, because the foundation's already there, but you're really like reworking what they already did. That was
like being a jazz musician, right?
Yeah,
it's
right,
like
exactly.
A standard.
Right.
Which, you know, I had done ad nauseum, right? Playing in endless clubs for hours and hours and hours doing that. That's how I supported myself at night, was playing in jazz clubs at night and during the day doing commercial sessions, like literally just working around the clock. And all of that background allowed me to take a song and look at the melody and go, oh yeah, well, you know, if it's major, I can go to the relative minor, or I can go to something that's, you know, depending on the, you know, the common tones, I might even push it a little and put it in the key you wouldn't necessarily think you could.
Yeah, just to get the tension and the
tension, and then and then the chorus go back to the original key. I mean, there were all sorts of things that I got to play with, and then the sounds that I picked, and the things that you could not change in that world were obviously the melody, on the what they called, you know, the main version, and then you would do something called a dub, where you would chop everything up.
Right, which sort of a different animal, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's an early morning thing. vibe. So it's just little snippets of vocals, mostly darker, more, harder music.
Yeah.
But the big vocal records that I was more known for being associated with were much more elaborate. And I would do string arrangements, I would do horn arrangements, like, and if I had the budget,
Yeah.
I'd bring in real players.
Yeah, and you hear that on the mixcation.com site. You hear all of that coming into play on each tune. Like also, just like even like somebody like Dido who has a really interesting voice, you really compliment her voice with what you're doing. Like you're supporting what's there, but you're adding a whole nother flavor. That's really, really exciting.
Thanks. I was really proud of that remix. It didn't end up making it, which happens from time to time on the version that they released, but I just, I heard it was a much simpler production. It was just piano, a little bit of a beat, but with all those vocals. And I just really wanted to just make it be like this much more epic experience. And and that was not for club. That was like doing an alternate radio version.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah, because that's the thing. I mean, there's club versions, there's radio versions. Some of the club versions can go on for 20 minutes, right? I mean, just depending on what you're doing. And
20, but 10, yeah.
Yeah. And then you also, I know you worked with a lot with Tracy, who's Madonna's DJ. What's Tracy's? Yeah, Tracy Young. Tell me about that. And how did that come about?
So one of the guys that I work with, who's an agent in New York, called me up one day. He said, "Hey, I'd love for you to come to lunch." And at the time, I was touring with David. Yeah. And I was in between things that we were doing.
Right. I should mention because we haven't talked about that, but you were with David Cassidy as a keyboard player for how many years with David?
Well, we met in 2007, but I met him as a producer, not as a keyboard player.
Oh, okay.
Because I produced a record for him, and that's how we met. And he hired me to play for him much later.
Yeah. But how long did you end up playing with him? Because that's actually how we met originally, was on David's memorial concert.
Yes, exactly. You and I played together in Saratoga. That's a really great question. I want to say 2010. So I think I played with him for 6 or 7 years. I'd have to go back and look at it.
Right. Yeah.
But I was doing guest spots with him right away, like after I produced the record, which was called David Cassidy the Remix Part 2. There was no Part 1, so I'm not quite sure what that was about. But a friend of mine who had the label, thought, oh, it'd be cool if we did it as a volume thing. I said, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Because he had so many great songs. I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah, and to his credit, I mean, he was very dubious at first, but once we got into it, and basically I followed him around the country and recorded his vocals in hotel rooms because he just didn't have time to do it.
Right.
And he was just so blown away that I could show up with a mic and a laptop because he hadn't experienced that before. And
right. Yeah.
A little early. I mean, now it's like de rigueur, but at the time I was doing it, I was a little on the earlier tip with it.
Yeah.
And he invited me to come debut the album in London with him. He flew me over, and we were going to do 4 songs from the album, and partly play along with the tracks.
Right.
Music director who Frank Fabio, lovely, totally supportive. Loved the idea of it because it broke the setup.
Yeah, our friend Frank is was David's band leader for many years. He lives in Vegas. He's a bass player, great bass player. Anyway, go ahead.
and a really good guitar player.
And a good guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and a good guy, and was just awesome.
Yeah.
So we did the sound check together. It went great. And he was like, I want you on stage.
Wow.
I was like, okay. So they opened their set, and we're at the Hammersmith Apollo in front of 2,500 people.
Right.
And he goes, I'd like to debut my, this is my good friend Craig J from the States, or Chicago, blah blah blah. These are the new arrangements, and the keyboard comes up on the light, and I sit behind there, and we count it off, and off we go. And people loved it because it was like,
it's fresh. It was fresh, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was dance versions of his classic stuff, and
awesome.
He's such a showman. He set it up beautifully.
Yeah.
And the band couldn't have been more lovely and accommodating and gracious. And we just had a blast in the
Awesome.
UK together.
Yeah.
And that's how the playing part of it came, because he saw what he liked about the sensibility I brought as having been a child performer and performing my whole life, even though I wasn't really active at that point, because I was, again, my career at that point was scoring commercials and television, doing sessions and doing remixes. I wasn't.
But he could feel that you knew you were.
Yeah, there was like 10 years
frequency.
there that I didn't really perform much, except for some local clubs on occasion, just because.
A lot of people don't realize. I mean, I guess maybe they should have, but like David was huge globally, not just in the States. I mean, he used to be England, Australia. I mean, even still after all the TV stuff had gone away. I mean, you guys were playing all over the world, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Which is, I'm sorry, I never got a chance. I mean, I saw David, but I never got a chance to see him with you guys. But I mean, I love all those tunes.
Yeah, he did it. He did a great job, and he would tell stories about the songs and give you the background too. I mean, it wasn't just running through the set. And I've said this numerous times in other public forums that, I mean, he was much more like a jazz musician than a pop musician. He loved to improvise. He loved to change it up. He would change up. We'd have a set list, but he would audible change the tune if he wasn't feeling like either the crowd was with us or he was feeling it. He would, we changed the keys. We would change, obviously, the arrangements, because I had already started that.
Right.
And then the whole band solo thing started, where we each had a feature. And so what we would do is we would start playing things, try and stump each other.
Yeah.
So that was really fun.
Yeah, I know. He really featured you guys. I know the videos I've seen, like he made a point to like everybody got a solo, everybody got a mention, which is a lot of those guys, a lot of those stars, those guys. I mean, we both played with a lot of them, and not all of them are as comfortable with doing that. So it's
you have way more experience than I do in that realm for sure. I mean, you've played with a lot more different people in that form than I have. But yes, to your point, most people are not as gracious, and certainly don't like he had Terry sing a song by herself. I mean, that's just unheard of.
Yeah, our drummer.
He always did that Pretender song, and he got a chance to play drums, and
that was fun. That was fun.
And it worked. Exactly. Yeah, because he was about performing and entertaining, and he really got that. And not a lot of people were really about that. They were about
just stand there and sing. Yep.
Right. And you know the expression, play the ink, right?
Yeah.
I do not deviate from, the chart. And
right.
With him, it wasn't that way at all. We would funkify up one song, and we, get, more kind of sexy, groovy on another song. And, he loved, like us, playing with the arrangements. So
that's awesome.
It was awesome. He was a very unique person that way. And he wasn't, a lot of people get threatened by that. And he was never threatened.
Yeah.
Like never, ever threatened.
Yeah. And you, I mean, you were with him really up until the end, right?
Oh, like the day before he died. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I know you guys were, I mean, I know Terry, his drummer, who's both of our friends, Terry Cote. I know you guys participated in the A&E stuff, the television thing.
Yeah, that was shot at my studio.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great, man. I'm glad you have a lot of good memories of him, and I know he was such a powerful performer for many years.
Oh yeah, and he was a real champion of all of us. Like he was just a fan and wanted us to have, the most positive experience that we could have when we were doing stuff. And even like the little stuff, like he made sure we had we always had our own hotel rooms.
Right.
We had access to people who would drive us around.
Right. Yeah, that stuff makes it nice for musicians.
All the difference in the world. There was always a per diem as a part of what we were doing. I was hearing on the road some people, not so much, or it was a little bit of a hassle, or so he was generous, and he got it and was really supportive. And then the whole backline thing, right? I never had to worry about anything, because it was just, I'd show up and it was just taken care of. I mean, and Frank dealt with all the logistics of that and did a great job. But again, David was really supportive of it. Like nobody had to bring their axes.
Yeah, that's awesome. tell me. So I kind of went to with the
Yeah, we
David
left the
thing.
remix world
No,
and
it's
we
okay
went
because
to the
that's
Cassidy
but
world.
the David. Well, with you, there's a lot to cover, and with David, I mean that's an important part of your life and your legacy with him. Um, but yeah, just go back to so Tracy and the remix thing. Tracy
So
from
yeah, I met
Madonna's.
Tracy because my agent Brad said, "Hey, I'm hosting a dinner in my lunch in Miami with a whole group of people."
Right, because she's based
And
in Miami, right?
she lives in Miami, and at the time I had started working with um, Casey of Casey and the Sunshine Band. His real name is
Ah,
Harry.
right.
And I had just started working on an original song with Harry, having worked on a remix for him.
Yeah,
And so he was like, "Why don't you come down? Let's talk about like creative direction on this new song with Harry."
yeah,
And Tracy's going to be there. And so, yeah, I had lunch, and there was like, some promoter, it was kind of like this weird mix. And, like the idea of just flying down to have lunch was so like odd to me.
that's how
But
the
when he
music world
told,
works, right?
yeah, you just got to be, you just got
you
to,
gotta
and
shake
that's
hands
happened.
and show up and yeah,
You have to, like, there's
yeah,
been lots of times, and especially if you don't live in one of the epicenters, like,
right,
the good and the bad. But at least with Chicago, I can get on a plane, be anywhere in not too long. And so that's what I do. Someone says, "Let's have dinner." I get
right,
on the plane and we have dinner. And
right,
I don't make a thing about it, right?
yeah,
So we hit it off. We really enjoyed each other. And Tracy and I. And we just started collaborating in the same way. I mean, she's not a trained musician
right.
per se, but
But she's a star in the DJ world for sure,
she's a
right?
star in the DJ world, and in her own right. She's got great ears, great A&R sensibility. So we did several original songs together that came out on her Feroce label with an artist named Suzanne Palmer, who's an iconic singer in that world.
Mhm.
We did some remixing. We did work on the ill-fated Hillary Stronger Together anthem.
Right.
Broke my heart because that song turned out great, and then
Yeah.
we know how that went.
Yeah.
So she's been in Chicago several times. We've worked on some music for a television show called Corporate together.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you've
And
actually been doing even well, I guess you've always been doing that along the way, but you've been doing a lot of TV and also film scoring recently,
yeah,
right? How did that kind of come about? Was that part of related to the remixing and the DJ kind of thing, or that
not
was a whole
really,
different
actually.
whole
I
separate
mean,
thing?
yeah, it was just a whole separate thing, and I think it came more out of the commercial thing because
Hmm.
when you're doing a lot of commercial work, like I was, especially in the early O's, um, you do really high level stuff. People see you, people
Yeah,
hear you.
because you were doing like Porsche, McDonald's, like
I was
some
doing big
big,
stuff. Yeah, the
yeah,
big
big,
agencies in the coast,
right,
as well as Chicago, big, and working on big campaigns that either I won or I was part of a
yeah.
consortium of composer producers. There were
Yeah,
at
and
the time
that's high competition because those are good
very high competition because
Yeah,
the
right.
money was great when they were paying residuals. I
Yeah,
mean, so in the 2000s and the 90s, the residuals were, that was the peak to be doing that work, because
right,
now it's all, license and buyout. There's really
right.
no,
Yeah, one time pay, residuals. Yeah.
yeah,
I
sadly.
guess that's the whole. I mean, the whole music world's kind of gone there, right? That's sort of.
Publishing is still strong.
Yeah.
So if you're a really successful urban artist, your publishing's worth a lot,
Right.
because of ASCAP and BMI and all the various strengths. So that's the
Yeah.
equivalent of what we would get if, as players through AF of M
Right.
back in that era. Now it's, ASCAP and BMI still were doing their thing then, but
Yeah.
the
As
nature.
artists, like the publishing end of it, like a lot of people. I mean, people have come to realize that more and more. But a lot of these kids, they get the record deals where they sign away their publishing, and they're not realizing that that's actually the big money. out
Yeah,
many,
I mean, fortunately, even if you sign what you're publishing, that's only half your money, but still, it's
Yeah.
half your money.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all relative, and it's like athletics.
And if
You
you
might,
ever want to get off the road someday, that you need that.
yeah,
You
yeah.
need that
Well, and
the mailbox
you
money.
may only have one hit, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
may only have one thing that generates money for a little while, or you may have a run of 5 or 6 years, but you're living real high on the hog, and
Right.
you can't sustain what
Yeah.
you
And
built up.
we've all heard those stories for
Hey, listen,
sure.
I've been there personally.
Yeah.
I've
Me
ramped
too.
up and I've had to pare back. So
Yeah. I have my Cirque du Soleil money, but that that went away.
right. You did Cirque. I'm sure that
Yeah.
was an amazing experience.
Yeah, that's probably one of the closest things you can get to a day job for a musician, where you have like a regular schedule, you got healthcare, like all that stuff. That just doesn't, as you know, it's so rare. It doesn't really exist for what we do.
Well,
But
yeah, that broke my heart to see that, with COVID, they had to file for bankruptcy.
yeah, that's hopefully they'll come back. My wife actually works with, she does ticketing for Cirque, so hopefully that'll sort itself out. We're waiting to see, but who knows?
By the spring or the summer.
Yeah, hopefully. Tell me about, I know you're big into collaborating, and that's actually one of the things you have on your site. Like, if you want to
Yeah.
collaborate, tell me about your thoughts on that, and how that's worked for you over the years.
I just, I love not being the only person sitting in front of a screen and monitors and instruments. Because early on, when all the technology came in line, and we were all like, "Oh my God, we can be Stevie Wonder, we can be Intervision, we can play everything."
Right. Yeah.
And well, just because you can play everything doesn't mean you should play everything.
Yeah, and you need the different influences, a different input, right? To get the
Right.
different, you need all the different ingredients. Otherwise, you end up with a flat soda pop.
Yeah, and I loved, and I was really blessed. I had a really long, I had like a 20-year stretch where, the studio that I still have in the city, I was able to hire musicians multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day.
Right.
People coming in and playing my charts for commercials during the day, and then doing, album-oriented stuff in the evenings. And that was like my favorite experience of all. Is just, everybody getting together in the control room, listening to the demo of the song, looking over the chart,
coming up with ideas
and brainstorming around ideas and singing each other stuff. And my buddy, who might be the guitar player in that session, go, "Hey, well, what do you think about blah?" And the bass player pick up the bass, and everybody just kind of sits around, and I'd be at the piano, or whatever. I pick up the guitar and sing them something.
Yeah, there's a magic to that, right?
Love it.
Yeah.
That to me is, where really great stuff happens. And
do you find a lot of producers that are open to that idea, or is it what's your thought on that? Like, it seems like some guys have it's maybe different styles. Like some people come in with everything's already laid out, and some guys are willing to collaborate, or I don't know.
Yeah, and I think, I think a lot of times exactly. I think it's your frame of reference. I mean, if you really are controlling in your artistic vision and you want to execute it a very specific way, not good, not bad, that's just how you're wired, and that's just what you're doing.
Yeah.
Then that dictates a certain type of vibe. I was so not that. I started off with lots of ink and realized I'm hiring this, this world-class person, this fantastic, I'm hiring these really fantastic people to come and work with me. So the collaboration came in is, okay, it's like what Miles, I don't know if you've seen any of the documentaries or anything about the way Miles did Blue and Green.
Yeah, right? I've actually interviewed a lot of the guys that used to play with Miles, and we talk about that. And you can actually, on some of the records, you can hear him directing the band in the recording.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny.
And he's got some changes, and he's got some melodies, and he's got some ideas, but it's like, let's throw everybody in the room and see what happens.
Yeah. And all, like you said, all world-class guys that have something to bring to
great musicians. Right. That's when great, and sometimes not, sometimes it's just, it falls apart. And then that's where the producer part comes in. You got to know when to pull the plug and go, okay, That
Yeah.
wasn't a good idea. We're going to go in this direction. Let's
Right.
do this. Let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
And then depending on the artist you're working with, some artists are very persnickety.
Right.
It has to be like down to like not only the microphone they're using, where the microphone is placed, what the lights are there candles, what's in the room, can anybody be in the room? I mean, like
Green M&Ms. Yeah.
well, that's the Van Halen thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing. And I saw that firsthand. That was like
Yeah, we've all experienced some of that stuff.
That was an eye-opening experience to be backstage for that motherfucker.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah, I've been pretty. I think you have too. We've been pretty lucky and pretty blessed to work with some great people. That I think trust is a big part of that. As a producer, they have to trust you to bring it.
Yeah.
You have to trust the artist that they're going to come in and show up prepared, and it's all kind of it's a collaboration at its essence.
And it's so intimate. You can't. That's why I started engineering. At least a lot of my own stuff was. At least more vocal sessions, because that's like the most vulnerable someone can be is when they're singing
right
with people in the room.
And they got three guys sitting there listening to them sing right directly.
Yeah, I just started doing those as closed sessions. Like, no one's here. Let whoever it is figure out what their character is and what their story is, and they got to be able to tell it without all the other jazz going on around them, because when people are just sitting around, whatever. So
right, yeah.
But no, I that's more of like my favorite thing to do is because it's all about casting like the right group of people
right
for the right situation,
putting the right mix together,
putting them in the room. I mean, definitely having a roadmap, definitely having a vision, but within that vision, having a lot of open space for them to bring to it what they do, and then you can pare it back, or you can have them open it up.
Right.
So I might say, hey, this bass part is great, but can you give me, can you simplify it by 80%?
Yeah.
And then in this transition to this section, let's try this, and maybe in the outro, instead of going to this kind of more double time feel. If you could give me, more quarter note with some ghost stuff.
Right. Let it breathe.
Let the drummer, pick up some of the accents and some of the syncopation, and then the guitar player can slide in here. And so that's some of the language that I like to use, because I'm not saying no on the E and the ah of bar 3,
right.
Of the third beat. I want you,
Because you already got the players are already good. You just trying to get them
like that.
Right.
When we're sitting there, I'm like marking up my chart, because I'm on the talk back with someone, and they're like, okay, and then when you go to play it, like being in the chair as the player, it's like I'm thinking about making my shit accurate, but.
Right.
It definitely
still has to groove and find right, exactly.
Yeah, because I'm focused on hitting the notes, as opposed to I got to get the feel of this to feel good.
Well, that's if you listen to the old Motown stuff or that kind of that era, like a lot of the charm and the magic actually was little things that were maybe not quite in time, or maybe it was a little sideways, but actually added a really cool
it was a little floaty, and that's why it felt good, and they were responding to like the vocal that was happening. And a lot of times everybody got in there and just did it like as a live performance, right?
Yeah,
that was the other thing.
What would be coming to present day, like what would be your advice to people that want to get into doing remixing, get into that world? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, there's so many opportunities online. People just sharing a cappella vocals. And
even using Zoom and things like this, right? As vehicles.
Yeah, exactly. And young people that are what are now called beat makers or bedroom producers.
Right.
Take a vocal, you throw it in the computer, and you're putting different stuff up against it. So the way you make a name for yourself is, you got to have your own little twist to it, right? So and that's what I mean. You'll see these blips where someone will do something, this record will go crazy, but they can't replicate it. And then someone else who's got a little more talent and a little more foresight, will build on it and then write a song around that. And it's
Right.
an original song, and that original song starts doing something, and then someone asks them to, rework their thing. But, it's much more weighted, believe it or not, more on the original than the remix. At that time when I was coming into it, the remix thing was a big deal, paid a lot of money when you got it.
Yeah.
And once you got into that circle of people, just like anything, it was like, okay, you were one of the
building your name and your reputation.
You were one of the preferred vendors. Now it's, technology's leveled everything out. There isn't a lot of reason on a business level to remix, but it's a great thing to do still in terms of your career and
creativity, right? You want to create something.
Right. And the challenge of taking an iconic band or an iconic artist, a singer, and putting what you do on it, and it gets noticed, and it definitely generates other opportunities and connections.
Yeah. And I think too, like maybe with outlets like YouTube and even like TikTok and these kind of things, like it's really changed the world for that, right? As far as getting your stuff out there and getting heard.
Yep.
And it's really true of all singer songwriters, kind of every genre, right?
Yeah. Well, and some people have built a career from DJ Khaled, prime example. His Snapchats were less about the music and more about the person and the entertainment. And then you went and found what he was doing.
Right.
Almost like as an addendum as opposed. So it's like, there's so many different ways that.
Yeah. And the public kind of decides what they like at the end of the day, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the great democracy of the whole music thing.
Yeah. Well, and you and I, how many times have you seen these YouTube videos of these kids that have mind-blowing techniques,
right?
But they have spent their, everything is done in this bubble that you and I are talking about.
Yeah, in their bedroom. Yeah.
In their bedroom, and you put them on a stage in front of 8,000 people. Good luck with that.
Right.
Or you put them in a club, some jazz prodigy, and put them in a club at Ronnie's, go play Ronnie Scott's for a couple hours and then tell me how
people sitting like two feet from you.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the great equalizer.
Yeah. And I've been, on both sides of that fence,
right.
So I get it, but, and it's amazing some of the stuff I've seen, you've got, in that world, especially you've got the Jacob Colliers, and there was some French girl I saw the other day. Someone told me she's like 20, she's playing with Ariana Grande, but she's her name's Domi. She's mind-blowing technique.
Yeah. And obviously, and just these little kids too, right? You see that not only, instrumentalists, but also remixing, mixing, doing tracks.
Because all these resources are completely available to you. And so the whole thing in that regard has gotten elevated. But definitely what's missing, if you compare it to what preceded it, is what you and I were just talking about. A lot of these people are not, getting together, or not everybody, but again, people who spend a fair amount of time coming up in the bubble.
Right.
That's where that 10,000 hours is. For our generation, it was inseparable. You didn't get heard or seen. You didn't have a career unless you came up and were able to play and comport yourself in a certain way.
Do it for real in front of people.
And do it for real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a band leader used to say to me, live in front of people. I was like, yeah, I get it. I got to be able to do it live in front of people, not in the practice room.
Exactly. Not in your bedroom.
You're like one of those trained classical prodigies. And I'm like, okay, first of all, I wasn't a prodigy.
Yeah.
Second of all, don't lord that over me. This is, this is just
no pressure, right?
Yeah, this is just a gig. I think we're all going to be okay. They're not coming to hear me play rock.
Nobody's going to lose a finger, hopefully.
Right. And they're not trying to, not here to hear me, my interpretation of giant steps or whatever. Right. So truth be told, I can play my parts and fit in with the rhythm section.
Yeah.
And make stuff feel good and sing my background parts if you want me to sing.
But hey, you know what? That's the important stuff. That's all. Really, people ask me what does it take to be a working musician? I'm like, that's it. What you just said. Show up, be nice, play the parts.
Right.
It's
No
really
drama.
it's no more difficult than that.
No, and fit in and make what you do feel good and
Yeah.
make everybody better because you are a part of the experience and not trying to dominate the experience. You're not,
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're the artist, and we've all worked for people who are really rugged and you have a tense, vibe in the band, and it definitely comes out in the experience.
Right.
And then that's what I loved about playing with David is, we got up on stage, we all loved each other, we all had a blast together, and people really, really enjoyed that experience when that happened. And
and they had, his fans they still love him, but they loved him. They loved you guys.
oh
There was
yeah,
a very
that's still
supportive
like,
fan base.
oh my God, it's just, it's been 3 years since he's been gone, and you just think it was yesterday, and then people are still so.
Yeah, because the music, the music lives on,
some stuff does,
Yeah.
and you think about how much doesn't, right?
Right, exactly.
Like really doesn't live beyond like it's, it's kind of,
it's a hit. It's a hit and it goes away, and you don't remember who did it. And
especially in the pop world, and especially in the dance music world, it's so disposable. And that stuff, you've played with a lot of iconic musicians, so you've played all those classic hits with a lot of different.
Well, they always say if you're lucky enough to have a hit, you're going to be playing it for the next 40 years. So you better come to grips with that.
or the next 40 years.
Well, yeah, exactly. David had so many hits, so many iconic hits on his own, the Partridge Family, all that stuff. So
totally.
It's pretty awesome. What are your what's your current and future things going on? What projects do you have coming up?
So right now I'm scoring a series for CNN called Dark Was the Night. It's a docudrama series, 6 1-hour episodes.
Okay.
I don't know. I think that's coming out. I think it's going to be first quarter of next year. So we'll see how that plays out. And then my project that has been dormant because of COVID, but Ralphie and I signed to a small label with our project. We call ourselves the Shamanic, and the Shamanic is
right. Yeah, I saw your Instagram.
My blurb. Yeah. So we joked we were the the medicine, the musical medicine man, and we were the B2B guys. Like the public didn't know us, but
it's cool. What you guys are doing is really interesting. It's really fun stuff.
And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to create happy, uplifting, inspiring music based on from the Chicago tip. No one's done it in a long time.
Right. Which is a certain vibe.
It's blues, it's jazz, it's soul, and then some of it's got we've got a couple of tracks that are really totally swingy, like Mancini, Cocktails, 60s vibe.
Yeah, and it's nice. It's nice to have the freedom to do that, right?
Yeah. So that project is coming out, and
awesome.
we're doing we've done several music videos for the first single, which is called Fire, and then we're working on our second music video for that.
Yeah.
The hope was to start to do some small festival tours to kind of get the awareness out, because we're kind of in between some stuff. And we're not a Calvin Harris or a Diplo. We're not young and pretty. We're not going to hold down one of those poolside Vegas venues where we're you see us getting $1 million a night. That's not going to happen. We're
but but the music, the music speaks, and it's good stuff. And I think that there's a place sort of for everybody at the table, right?
You never know.
Yeah.
You got to do what you love, and the bottom line for me, what's become more important, especially as time has gone on, it's who you're doing it with.
Right. Exactly.
And I could be doing a lot of different kinds of stuff because I've floated in and out of all of it. Classical to jazz to soul to funk to urban to blah 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 blah. And Ralphie and I have a blast together. He's technically not a musician even, and that's what's so fun about it is I'm going to play instruments. He's going to be spinning tracks. We're going to have guest vocalists coming. It's going to be kind of an interesting kind of.
So you have a lot of freedom and collaboration.
Yeah, it's going to be a show, and there's other people doing things like it in the the EDM world. So it's cool. There's a precedent for it, but they're not doing it like we're doing it because we're coming at it from which is ironic for me to say this, but a little more from a traditional perspective, meaning
Yeah.
it's a little more rooted in the music and less in the technology.
Right. Yeah. And
And
there's, I
and
mean,
you
there's,
know,
that's
we'll
where the
see.
soul is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, we'll see. I'm still writing music for commercials, so periodically, you know, I'm doing stuff that pops out on that tip. I write songs for television shows, and so I just did a big round of pitches for a bunch of stuff that's coming
Yeah.
online. So we'll see what sticks and what doesn't. Usually, it's
What's the best
sticks.
way that people that might want to collaborate with you or reach out to you? What's the best way for them to touch base with you?
You know, my Insta feed, Craig J. Snider, message me is a great way to go. Facebook, same thing, Craig J. Snider.
Yeah, LinkedIn, which you have your
Or
bio up
LinkedIn,
there.
yeah, LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn too, and those are great ways to connect with me.
Yeah, we
sure.
sort of all have to have our multiple gazillion different pages.
Oh my God, it's just so
It gets a little overwhelming.
a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I know. I actually, like some people play video games. I actually enjoy doing the social media stuff because I see, I went as soon as which is funny to mention, but when I first saw MySpace, I'm like, I get it because I grew up in LA playing in clubs and doing that whole promotion thing. And as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I get exactly what that is, and I get the power of it. And that's with what we do as musicians, as artists, with what you're doing with your artists and that kind of thing. I mean, it's just a game changer because now we don't have to go through a label, right? We can get all the stuff out there.
Right. Yeah, I mean, with licensing and commercial to all the various media and streaming, even though streaming isn't going to, necessarily put a lot of money in your pocket, but if you do it right,
but it gets you out there. Yeah,
it gets you out there. You can make some with merchandising and other. I've been watching these seminars about YouTube, which I didn't know a lot about, but apparently you can do if you can get your traffic up, you can make good money from YouTube. So
yeah,
it's on the one hand, what the toughest part is you got to create structure for yourself.
Right.
But once you figure it out and you figure out how to feed it, and as long as it's like really who you are,
yeah,
people do very well by it, and it's sustainable once they figure that part out. And that's the hard hurdle to get over. But once you get over it, and it's not just the music tip, it's you're a young filmmaker, a young graphic artist, young whatever, and
it all ties. Yeah, it all ties in. Yep.
I think wherever you are in your life, and that's what we've started to do. We're starting to create content, Ralphie and I, for our shamanic project, where we're just talking about what we do, and
you could bring in filmmakers, you could bring in young guys that have creative ideas, and that's fun. Yeah. Like it comes back to the whole collaboration thing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And their social media presence feeds yours. It all works together.
Yep.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Just be open to it's chaos theory. You just got to be open to what it is and where it comes from. Who knows?
Right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're a super busy guy, and we stay in touch online. And I really admire what you've accomplished. And besides all that, you're a good guy, which I think that also is important, right? In this whole music craziness, is to be a decent person that people want to hang out with.
You got that right. Oh my God.
Yeah, because we both experienced both sides of that. So
yeah. The ups and the downs, for sure, and especially as a live performer trying to ride out the COVID era. It's very
right. Yeah, it's been particularly challenging for sure.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Craig.
Thanks for having me, man. It was awesome.
Absolutely, and it's my pleasure. And we're going to make sure we put links up to all your ways people can get a hold of you, your social media pages and all that kind of thing, so people can check that out. And I encourage people to find you. You have a lot of your stuff posted also on mixkitchen.com.
I'm on mixkitchen.com. I'm one of the Lander featured producers. They just launched a service for production services. So if you're on Lander and you need some help on that tip, my examples are up there, and
awesome.
And I'm collaborating with artists on that platform too, helping get them produce or mix stuff, and people are reaching out to me to just mix too. So it's, sometimes I'm producing, sometimes I'm just mixing their stuff, or
it's all
doing
good
some
fun.
Keyboard parts. And we can work on Zoom now. That's what's amazing, with the screen share and and different ways of monitoring. It's all like we can all be where we are. It's really interesting.
Yeah, it's a whole new world, and thank God because of COVID, we were able to keep in touch and do these kinds of things,
well,
right?
It was just at that point where we could,
Right.
A year or two earlier, maybe not so much, but
Right. Yeah, it's all really changed a lot in the last year for sure.
yeah.
All right, cool, man. Have a great night in Chicago, and
Thank you. Have a good. Are you in Vegas?
Yeah, I am. Yep.
Uh,
Enjoying the sort of warm weather.
yeah, the sort of warm weather is right.
Yeah. But
Right.
all right, cool, man. Thank you so much. And
Great to see
everybody,
you.
please check out Craig J's stuff online. There's lots of it there, and then the remixes are really awesome. So I encourage you to do that. Cool, man. Have a great night.
Thanks.
Ciao. Bye.
Cheers.
Thanks for joining us, and please consider subscribing to our podcast and follow us on our social media pages for guest announcements.